In the early weeks of summer 2023, the Online News Act, Bill C-18, was legislated into effect by the Canadian Parliament, targeting tech giants such as Meta and Google, with efforts to regulate Canada's news media ecosystem to enhance fairness in the digital news market. This has resulted in the censoring of Canadian news by these organizations on their respective platforms, sparking controversy and outrage across the country. I'm Ian Curran, and joining me today to talk about the Online News Act is political analyst and chair of the Journalism and Communications Department at St. Thomas University, Dr. Jamie Gillies. Thank you for joining me today, Dr. Gillies.
Thanks so much, Ian.
So to begin, how do you think that the blocking of Canadian media on these platforms is going to affect the country?
Well, I think the biggest effect that it's having is, of course, on small local media, newspapers, online newspapers, student media that are not part of the big players like the newspaper chains and the big networks. That's been sort of the big glaring hole in this legislation. And there is some uncomfortable growing pains that I think communities such as St. Stephen and St. Andrews and local papers in New Brunswick and local media in New Brunswick that are probably going to be struggling with for a little bit, given what's happened with Meta and Google and X and the big players in social media.
And what effect do you think that this will have on these smaller news media organizations across the country?
Well, right now, I think many of these organizations are scrambling to figure out a better delivery device for their content because they're not being seen on the socials as they once were. It does present an opportunity to a number of them, of course, to sort of rethink the way in which we get news and local news. But they had developed a system, even a patchwork system over time, that had relied on people following them on social media. And now, if that's not going to be the case, at least in the short term, that presents a huge challenge for a lot of these media organizations.
And so, in your opinion, do you think Ottawa should continue to pursue these big tech giants like Meta and Google as they are now?
Well, I think from a policy standpoint, long term, for the viability of news media in the country, it should be these media giants that do pay their share or pay to be part of this. If they're the distributor of news content, and I think this is what Pablo Rodriguez and the Liberal government have been arguing, that they should at least pay something towards being able to be the intermediary for this news content. But the challenge is more complicated than that. If they're not willing to pony up and pay their share, what happens now? So I think it's a little bit of a blinking game here. They're trying to stare each other down and see what happens. I suspect that at some point there'll be some sort of resolution to this. It might be suboptimum for everyone, but I think the reasons why the government went after the tech giants is because we all know that the viability of news content is in danger. And if they're not going to pay, then who is?
Okay, so do you think that this will shift the way that media is consumed here in Canada?
It may. For one thing, there is big changes, of course, happening in social media with the takeover of Twitter and now X by Elon Musk. There's a little more, I think, fragmentation occurring. We don't get all our news from one source, like a Facebook or like a Twitter. That could be a big game changer in the way in which media organizations in this country perhaps distribute content. But I think a lot of this is up in the air for the time being because at the moment, effectively, news media is not being seen on these social media platforms.
And so, I guess, in your opinion, what do you think the Canadian government should do at this point in time?
Well, I think that the act that passed Parliament this year probably needs to be revised and updated. I think one of the things they did was deliberately leave a lot of the language as fairly vague, precisely because this is probably going to need some further refinement, especially as we see where the changes to this impact particularly local media. They kind of got caught in the crossfire here between the sort of for-profit majors, the big players, Bell Rogers, and the newspaper chains and others. And the local media kind of got caught in the crossfire here. So I suspect there will be changes to come. But in the meantime, what does that mean for small media organizations, small television organizations, local journalism, local journalists? It does appear to be up in the air right now. So I suspect a resolution will be coming in the upcoming months.
In the meantime, what do you, I guess, suggest the Canadian population or the public do to help, I guess?
Well, the first thing is if you follow local or regional media content, my suggestion would be to follow it from the source. Go to the website, renew your subscription, or find out the ways in which local media are asking you to get their content if it's not going to be on social media. That would be the first one. It also gets us off perhaps our way of consuming news a little bit, which has been, of course, the news feeds of the socials, especially over the last 5 or so years. So going back to the original source would be very, very helpful, I think, to a lot of these media organizations, particularly if you want to support local journalism.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Gillies, for your input and doing this interview today.
Thanks so much, Ian.
My guest today was political analyst and chair of the Journalism and Communications Department at St. Thomas University, Dr. Jamie Gillies. As CHCO-TV navigates the removal of news media on social media, please follow our news director, Vicky Hogarth, for news updates and online exclusives. I'm Ian Curran, and thank you for joining me today.
A news and public affairs production of CHCO-TV, New Brunswick's only source for independent community television.